Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tina Woods.
So thank you so much for inviting me today to talk at the Mindhack Summit. Like you, I believe that AI is one of the most revolutionizing technologies of our time. And if used ethically and democratically, it can help to change the world for the better. I'm going to talk about how to live longer with AI, how AI is helping us extend our health span and live better too, and hopefully encourage all of you to come and get involved in this journey to make health more accessible to everyone in the world. First, just a little bit on myself. I've got a few hats that I wear, as you can see on the screen. I'm founder and CEO of Collider Health, and I help to build ecosystems to connect government, business, and academia to tackle big challenges in health. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of a social enterprise called Longevity International. And last year, through my other work on the all-party parliamentary group for longevity, published the Health of the Nation strategy. This is for the UK, United Kingdom, in February this year, just before COVID struck. There are extraordinary developments taking place in the field of longevity, and that's a term used to describe living longer and more healthily. Some of these developments have actually been directly inspired as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic. A lot of the hottest developments in the science are in the science of aging, understanding the underlying process of aging, embracing genomics, epigenomics, and many other omics, regenerative medicine, and so forth. This talk will talk about the potential of AI to help us live longer, better lives from the perspective of us as humans living in a much wider planetary ecosystem. And this is the big lesson that COVID has taught us. So COVID-19 and the Great Reset I'm going to talk about. COVID-19 has changed everything, our lives, our plans, our hopes, and our future. Bill Gates famously warned in 2015 that the next big threat to humanity was a pandemic threat that we are not ready for. But did he predict that the COVID-19 virus would take top spot as the biggest disruptor of the 21st century, ahead even of technology and the growing aging population? Now, we know, certainly in the United Kingdom and many other places in the world, we're having a terrible time with the pandemic, and I know India is too. We've got many studies. In fact, a very well-known study published in Nature magazine, one of the big leading science magazines, showed that people who are overweight with obesity, diabetes, coronary heart disease, and hypertension, that's high blood pressure, were much more likely to die from COVID-19. And these are all mostly preventable diseases linked to social inequalities and lifestyle linked with that. The big lesson of COVID-19 is that our health must be treated as our greatest asset around the world, and it's absolutely linked to the future prosperity and the wealth of nations too. Rather strangely, many positives are unfolding through the epidemic, which are very powerful. For one thing, leaders around the world have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape how societies can provide healthier, better lives for more people, and linked to greener living as well, and linked to more equitable outcomes for all people. And this is something that the World Economic Forum has hailed as a great reset, which you see on the slide. So this is a scary slide with the coronavirus all over the place. Most experts agree that we'll be living with the pandemic for some time, even if the vaccine becomes available later this year. The pandemic has exposed the health inequalities that exist in society around the world, certainly in the Western world, but also in Asia. And of course, you can see the media articles that are listed up there. And COVID has also shown us and given us an appreciation of the cost of poor health. A recent report estimates that the cost of ill health around the world was about 15% of global GDP in 2017. And the COVID-19 pandemic and its repercussions will reduce global GDP by 3 to 8% in 2020. And what the report concludes is that long-term prevention and health promotion, which encompasses more than 70% of the benefits that this report identified, cannot simply be left to healthcare systems. It is quite literally all up to everybody. It's everybody's business to sort this out. And this is where the technology community and all the AI researchers and developers around the world have a huge role to play. So what do we do as developers, as stakeholders, as citizens, as students, as AI researchers, activists? What do we do ahead? We have the chance to reimagine our world, something that Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum has talks about in this global reset. So wearing my parliamentary hat, so this again is the United Kingdom, we are focused on this ambition that we set, and this is in the government manifesto commitment, to extend our healthy life expectancy by 5 extra years while minimizing health inequalities. And one of the recommendations, which talks to the role of business, the business community, and of course with that are obviously all the businesses that harness technology, is what we can do as part of this global reset. And so I'm in the process of setting that up now with leaders from insurance, banking, and many other sectors with the support of government. So we have many big supporters from the business community, including people like Paul Polman, who is a former CEO of Unilever. Probably many of you have heard one of the biggest companies in the world, which is all around the global reset. And he has voiced support for our initiative, saying absolutely crucial what you are starting, which is the Business Coalition. And the coalition recognizes that shaping the recovery and charting a new course ahead is absolutely essential, but requires collaboration from the business community, from academia, and from government. So I won't go into detail, but you can see there's a number of different initiatives that we're planning. And I guess the one initiative to point you towards are the first two, which is a health risk management framework for health and a business index to measure contribution to health. And what we're doing there is taking inspiration from what is already in existence, risk management frameworks in the climate change agenda, which essentially guide investments by the wider business community. And I'm talking the money in institutional firms, asset management firms, capital markets, pension funds, to guide them in terms of investing in businesses for the future that don't harm the environment. So the whole net zero agenda. So we want to take some of the learnings from that and apply that into the context for health, and seeing this as our one of the biggest risks to be managed in the future ahead. So I'm going to turn to the role of science, technology, and society from a more personal perspective. And this is the heart of a book that has just come out, in fact, last week, which is called Live Longer with AI, How Artificial Intelligence is Helping Us Extend Our Health Span and Live Better Too. So this book takes a look at living better for longer and healthier through the lens of lessons learned from COVID-19. I interviewed about 30 people for the book around the world, including people like the world's strongest man, Eddie Hall, who swears by epigenetics to guide him through his fitness regime. And of course, I've interviewed leading scientists, futurists, even religious leaders, entrepreneurs, etc., to get their view on the future. My last interview was with Professor Baron Peter Piot, who some of you may know as one of the great virologists, very well known around the world for his role in AIDS, and he discovered the Ebola virus. And now, of course, he's very, very involved with COVID-19 and sits on the EU Commission for COVID-19. And what he has said is that key lessons from and he himself actually came down with COVID-19. And was in the news articles around the world, like New York Times, BBC, etc., talking about his whole experience. And of course, he didn't have a good experience at all and suffered a lot of the chronicity, the chronic symptoms of COVID, long COVID, I think they're calling it now. But his key lessons for the future, and this is something that as an AI community we should take stock of, is that governments and individuals need to act early. And of course, there are many lessons from around the world that show how much has been done in that sense. Countries like Taiwan, for example. Prevention is really important, health prevention, to remain in good health, because of course we've seen how COVID-19 affects people in poor health most. And we need to be ready, and we need to be ready for the next epidemic. And this is where the AI community has such a huge role to play. So moving on, I'm going to talk a little bit around the lessons learned of how we all fit into this wider sort of planetary ecosystem, and what the lessons are that we need to learn moving forward, which should guide us in terms of the tools and technologies ahead. So where do we begin? And of course, I talk about this in my book. So curiosity has driven humans to understand where they come from, who they are, where they're going. And of course, that sense of curiosity and that sense of hope and optimism, I think, is what guides a lot of the tech community, wanting to harness technology for the wider good. And I have to refer to Yuval Noah Harari, of course, who wrote *Sapiens*, who says human beings are all like algorithms and AI will overtake human beings. He reckons Homo sapiens will continue to evolve in the age of digital in one of two ways. The first is that we use technology to augment ourselves into superhumans. The second is that we become something completely distinct from what we are at the moment. A new species dawned through AI. This new species would be inorganic, but still living, breaking all the rules that have evolved and that we've been hearing since the days of Darwin, that we've evolved organically for over 4 billion years. If this new non-organic living entity becomes more powerful and more intelligent than humans, could this new species take over? This really calls into question the whole area of ethics and governance that is exercising many minds around the world, and which is absolutely fundamental in terms of harnessing the power of technology for the good of mankind. And it's also, I think the pandemic, if we go back to that, has brought attention to the finely balanced ecosystem of humans and other living things, including how humanity's destruction of biodiversity has created the conditions for new viruses and diseases like COVID-19 and will create the conditions for the next one. In my book, I refer to some very interesting work by Juan Carlos Castillo-Rubio, chairman of Space-Time Ventures. Look him up, he's doing fascinating work and recently launched the Earth Biogenome Project. This project aims to fully sequence everything on the planet, on the lands and in the oceans over the next 10 years, generating about 1,000 to 2,000 times more data than that produced by Twitter and YouTube combined. In his view, biology will be the most valuable enterprise in the 21st century. The science of aging is showing how closely we are connected to early forms of life, nematode worms, Drosophila flies. We all come from bacteria. Aging is an almost universal, unifying feature possessed by all living organisms, tissues, and cells, and is at the heart of so much incredible research today. So genes in the environments, the exposome, this growing field of the exposome. So turning to that, there's an ongoing debate between nature versus nurture, but research in omics, and anyone who is not familiar with the term, please look it up. It is absolutely fascinating and mind-boggling, the work that's going on there. To understand and address the way that the environment affects us, or how our genes are influenced by the environment, and how the environment affects our health, both at an individual level, but also at a population health level. The human exposome is the environmental equivalent of the human genome and encompasses much of what we refer to as nurture, how we're nurtured since birth. It represents the complex exposures we are subjected to throughout our lives, and some of them are on the slide here, including our diet, lifestyle factors, and social influences. It also incorporates how our bodies respond to these challenges, like pollutants, for example, like the air that we breathe. A significant part of a person's average lifespan is determined by these environmental influences. We can measure the impact of external factors on our health and how fast we are aging through something called aging clocks. Look up Steve Hovarth, who has developed the most famous aging clock called the Hovarth clock, and which can accurately tell the age of human tissues and cells. And these epigenetic clocks have been finding increasing application in measuring the successive interventions to delay or prevent aging, and which are linked to our health. Aging clocks can be used to help us measure the effects of interventions besides drugs, and we know there's a huge amount of activity in the pharmaceutical industry. As we aim to eat better, though, and eat less, and to live longer, for example, will this make us look younger too? So, of course, that's also a very interesting area of research that's that's developing in the area of skin biomarkers, for example. Graying hair and wrinkles are external signs of how we age, but they can also signal the state of our internal health and the aging process too. And one of the people that I interviewed in my book, Anastasia Georgievskaya, is doing groundbreaking work harnessing and looking at skin in combination with other biomarkers to actually assess our biological age and how we're aging internally and the state of our health. So health is our greatest asset and our most precious asset, and this is around the world and the key to global prosperity. This is how the pandemic has forced us to work out and look at how humans fit into this wider ecosystem and how we're impacted by our environment. The circumstances I mentioned, the exposome, the circumstances in which we are born, grow, live, work, and age are the strongest influences on our health and are often called the wider determinants of our health. To nurture our health as our greatest asset and to rebuild our global prosperity ahead, we need to tackle these wider determinants of health. And this is where AI has a huge role to play. So on this slide, I break them down in terms of healthy versus sick data. So we know that health is influenced by 5 key domains. We have the non-sick domains, which includes behavioral patterns, which are about 40% of the influences on our health. Our behaviors that guide us in terms of our eating and our fitness, etc. Genetics, which is about 30%, what we're given as in our genetic legacy. The social circumstances in terms of how we live, that's about 15%. And environmental exposures like pollutants in the air is about 5%. The sick component, which is actually the quality of the healthcare that we receive, is only about 10 to 15%. So it's actually a very, very small proportion of what keeps us healthy and well. Yet governments around the world, and certainly in the westernized world and in many Asian countries, is actually which consumes mostly the attention and also the budget of government, big business, etc. But the big opportunity of AI, and this is what I call to you and the wider community, is finding patterns in very large data sets in non-sick domains. And of course, big tech and WeChat and those big companies all know this and why they're investing so heavily into health. It's the most important data to look at if you are interested in keeping people healthy and well. Finding solutions that minimize the risk of disease, delay aging, and maybe even one day find the cure for dementia, the disease that we dread most around the world, is all at the heart of research at the moment to find those solutions. We're seeing fascinating developments with aging biomarkers and using multimodal AI to understand the patterns between these big data sets. And I must call out one of the most incredible researchers in this field, called Alex Zavaronkov, who is running in silico medicine. Look up his work, it's absolutely fascinating, and I interview him in my book as well. Helped by AI, people like him are working out which biomarkers will be most useful to track the process of aging, which is the fundamental biological process of all human beings and all animals, how we age, and also at the root of our health. But most importantly, can practically assess which interventions, what we can all do, whether it's what we eat, how we sleep, etc. Microbiome, for example, influences in our gut. What best works at an individual level, but which will also help us at a population level to develop the best strategies to keep us healthy and well. So this slide here is really around empowering citizens with data. And now in the Western world, and I know this is an international audience, the current pandemic has highlighted the weaknesses in our public health systems, but also the lack of data sharing between public and private sectors, which we need to inform population health and new thinking in the exposome, which I talked about in my previous slide, as well as prevent the next pandemic. We know that aggregated and anonymized data from telecommunications, social media feeds, satellite feeds, for example, can help track disease. And we've seen some phenomenal work. Again, I'll mention Taiwan, who've been really leading the way here. But the supply and demand of this data, as well as the skills, are widely dispersed across government, public sector, private sector, and civil society. So we need a way of harnessing those skills and making it easier to develop these technologies as a wider community. So better systems and government's frameworks to facilitate wider data sharing and new ethical data models to shape a new data economy could be one of the most significant legacies from COVID. We hear about the politics between China and the US and all the areas in between. And this is the big opportunity, looking at what models are going to be future fit for the future to really help us in the future of the world. So this is part of the thinking that I'm doing within the government work that I'm doing at a UK level. But I think we need to take, and I think a lot of this is about taking a much wider look at the data ecosystem, harnessing what we had seen in the previous slide, that the sick and the sick data, but also the non-sick, the healthy data, and looking at lessons from other data models and systems like open banking, for example, that is, and other sort of decentralized decentralized data models, which allow much easier data sharing and facilitates and opens up innovation in this way. We can choose to protect our health and stop the coronavirus by empowering citizens rather than relying on state surveillance, which of course some countries have done. But to achieve such a level of compliance and cooperation, you need trust. And I think this is at the heart of, in this world of technology, it is about trust. People need to trust the science, public authorities, and to trust the media. This is sadly in short supply. Indeed, again, referring to Yuval Noah Harari, who's written a lot about this, trust could be the biggest victim of the pandemic, and the collapse of trust could be even a far greater crisis that's happening. So we do need to call to our leaders to really help us restore this trust. But just a final slide to leave, leave it on a more optimistic note, because while technology will help empower us in many ways, we have to remember, and this again is one of the themes in my book, it is the simple things in life, whatever age and wherever we're born and wherever we live, it's the simple things in life that matter the most. It is striking that with all the leading pioneers that I interviewed in my book, when I asked them about the secret of living longer well and happily, what they do personally to achieve this, it really boils down to the fundamentals, which are on this slide. I often refer to Dan Buettner's work, who's talked about blue zone areas. These are areas around the world where people live very, very long ages, in their 90s and even in their hundreds. And these are areas like Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, and a few other places around the world. And what they all have in common are on the slide. They venerate age. They see age as wisdom, as something to see very positively. And I think, because I think one of the biggest problems that we have around the world is ageism, and of course not valuing our older people. So in areas where people live longer, age is venerated. And also there's a whole sense of family and social connections that give this sense of being very socially connected in their communities. The other big thing is around a reason for being, which in Japan is called ikigai, and it's all around the sense of purpose. Why are we here in this world? And then of course a lot of it is around just basic sort of healthy living, healthy food, active lifestyles, incorporating fitness in your day-to-day. So these are all the things that are very much around helping people to live longer, better lives. So it's not about wealth, it's not about GDP, it's about these very, very simple things. And this is where, again, technology can be harnessed for good. So just to close my presentation, we need to engage the wider public, and of course, with technology and with the communities like Mindhack Summit, where we can see technology in the hands of as many people as possible, democratically accessible. And of course, technology now, it is available to more and more people. Many tools are free and so forth. So at whatever age, whether you're young, 10 years old, 5 years old, whether you're 80 years old, 90 years old, technology is available to everyone. So let's really bring this technology as a force for good. We need the right ethical and governance frameworks for this. And this is again part of the leadership test around the world, so that we can use this technology as a powerful force for good, and especially to help us keep healthy, keep well, which will also help us minimize the impact of the next pandemic. But of course, AI can help us preempt and predict the next epidemic as well. So let's all work together as a community to do that. And let's look at measures of success in nations around the world that don't look at GDP, money as the key to success. It's about our health and well-being. There are countries like New Zealand doing amazing work and being very successful as a country, because they are looking at health as the most important thing and what guides government decision making. So I'll finish there, and I just wanted to say, fantastic to be involved in this Mindhack Summit, and I hope there's some time for some questions. So I'll close there. So thank you so much.